No countdown.
Cool.
Hey everybody, welcome to a special edition of WeeksEnd. We're doing it on Friday, but have another variant host. This is not Graham Noseworthy. Who is this on the stream?
I am a Tintin fan though.
You are, and we've talked about that. I believe that Graham is planning a special WeeksEnd at some point where it's all Tintin all the time, and I just make faces in the corner.
Yes.
So welcome to the show, Suzie. Thank you so much for joining. I'm so excited about this show in particular because we did start talking with our guest host last week about Loki, but we really didn't get into anything deep. You know, it was kind of like our fan love of the show. So we're going to talk about Loki today. I also want to talk first, I think, to kick things off, because you and I are like, we're in the tech marketing world by day, nerds by night. It all blends together, but I'm really excited about the return to live events. Graham and I have touched on this, but I'd love to talk about that with you because it's like happening right now. Like everybody's getting their tickets and, getting on the road this summer.
Yep.
So let's just start out. Like I wanted to geek out about what I'm planning. What are you planning? Do you have anything in particular?
Yeah, so I have a few things. As my Twitter handle professes, I am a geek about baseball and kind of a geek about other stuff, about comic book culture, Marvel, all that stuff as well. But I am going to my first kind of fully packed Nationals game, actually, which is my fandom, in just a few weeks. And I'm super, super pumped, totally prepared for my social anxiety to go like through the roof, but it is so worth it.
Yeah.
So like that, it's just like being in the park, having the fans there. Like, that's going to be amazing. And then the other experience that I was telling you that I am so excited for is going back to New York Comic Con.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just like there's a little bit emotional because it's in the Avett Center, which was one of the emergency places that they were using in the initial outbreak back in April 2020. And so in New York, and so, seeing all those images of like, the kind of army medical and like all that stuff, like being like, that's where I just was in like less than a year ago in my Chandra Noir costume and then being like, oh my God, this is like the world is ending. Like coming back to that space and connecting with fans and, doing all that, it's just going to be a really special time. So yeah, I'm totally there for it. What about you?
I hear you. So I have some Easter eggs in both what I'm wearing and what's behind me on the wall. So there's definitely a theme here. So I'm going to have to switch our banner to, I feel like I'm in a safe space and we can talk about the Avett Brothers. Yes. Graham thinks I'm a member of a cult, and it's kind of that way. I think it's more like Deadheads. Like we're the new generation of Deadheads. We follow this band around, and they are having their first show tonight at Bonnaroo Farm for a 3-night run in Tennessee, and it's their kickoff of coming back to live shows, basically. I am not there. I am down in Surf City, North Carolina, starting a week-long vacation with my family. But I am wearing my Avett's at the Beach shirt from last year because they also have a big festival in a tropical destination. They are having their fourth annual edition of that in January, and we just bought our tickets for that. So we have bought a lot of tickets. So that's January. That's in Mexico. That's going to be awesome. We have also bought tickets for like 3 other shows coming up. So we're going to go to Wilmington, North Carolina for Azalea Fest. We're going to go to Asheville, North Carolina in November. We're going to go to Richmond, Virginia. So we got a few on the schedule.
Yeah, I completely forgot a big one for me. I'm going to see American Utopia.
Oh, wow. Okay.
On Broadway. It's actually their first night back. And they were one of the shows that got canceled, and it's super exciting, or not canceled. I mean, they had to shut down. And so it's super exciting that they're coming back. Tickets went on sale. My dad, people in our family are like huge Talking Heads fans. And so that's going to be super exciting.
So did you see with,
so cool.
Jimmy Fallon did like a yay return to theater, like a musical bit with a lot of the folks, I think, from the New York, theater scene, and Lin-Manuel. That was really cool. So I think you and I were talking about this off screen, but I think there's just so much pent up anticipation for what we've missed, and also I think not taking things for granted, right?
Oh, completely. I mean, what a surreal 16 months, right? I think that's like one of the big takeaways for me. Like, how many times did we go someplace and it was like, oh, I'll see them again, or blew something off and like, oh, I can do it again. And I think one of the big things last year is when our schedules, is kind of like, there was that period where you could kind of be like, oh, I was supposed to be at such and such place. I know you and Graham had one with like events, right? You're like, right. Yep. I was booked to be here. Now I'm here. And so it was almost like you could almost imagine this like other reality. It almost felt like, in Planet B, there's, we're all going and doing our other stuff. And then, Planet A, we're all like stuck. And then when that kind of went away, in some ways, it was almost like another phase of living under these conditions. But just that sense of like, I should, I had tickets for this show, or I was planning on buying, I was planning on buying tickets for this show. I think that did something, is a really important realization. And I also think, to your point, we're in tech marketing. I've definitely been thinking about the importance of attention, right? And just the importance of attention, like during a live event, right? There's a reason performers get so irritated. They're like, don't look at the event through a phone, right? Like, be present in the moment. Don't just be like live tweeting and all that, which I know is like hard for us because that's what we do. But I'm fascinated to see kind of just how this shifts, because I do think that priorities have been rearranged. And
I think, you and I have talked about this in our day job of like, what does it even mean to do word of mouth now? Totally. What does it mean to participate now? And also there's I think there's an interesting angle to like how much of the virtual is going to remain. Cause you're talking about New York Comic-Con, and how they've, built this really popular virtual metaverse, version of the event that I'm interested to see what sticks around and sort of what transitions and what does a hybrid, fan thing look like?
Right. I was just thinking about this actually, because so I've told you I'm a massive fan of New Rockstar's YouTube channel. And one thing that they really took advantage of the opportunity to bring in additional voices to their show. And they actually now have a co-host who's like based in Boston. And previously everything was based in a physical studio in LA. And so that's an interesting aspect for me versus like the Nerdist is back in studio, right? Like there's this big thing like back in studio. But I think for them, they've seen a value add where they can bring in, more people. And I think that'll be a really interesting aspect. I think we may see this a little bit with some late night hosts where you're still seeing some guests. Like, it's okay to do a virtual interview. Like, that's shocking. I do think we need to get better. And I, one thing, again, you and I working in tech, right? There's this challenge when you have a hybrid situation where some people are virtual, some people are in person. Capturing that situation I think is going to be one of our bigger challenges. And I do think that that's where event tech that's going to be a big focus for it.
You were saying that right as I'm trying to adjust my ring light to make me look as good as you.
It's like insane, right? Like, I think that was probably one of my favorite parts is the, when you had the late night hosts who normally are so produced, show up in like
I loved it though, because I watch Fallon, and I watch we're probably the biggest fans of Kimmel and Fallon, and I kind of stopped watching Conan a long time ago, even though he was my favorite years ago. And he just ended his show this week, by the way. Like,
I know
we weren't planning to talk about that, but I just seeing him transition is like, awesome. He's been doing it a long time, and he even changed networks, and that was a big deal. But to see him go off air, I'm really interested to see like what he does, because normally a host of his magnitude, like historically, you run out the clock, and it's like you do it to the day you're like retiring and going off to sit on a beach or something or whatever. I don't think we've seen the last of Conan or Team Coco.
Oh, not at all. I think I would say that Jon Stewart has been a really great example of this.
You're right.
Right?
He is.
But he may be the kind of first, and I think Conan is even more like.
Well,
there's
forget
even more
what
right?
I said. There's like awesome examples now that I think about it. Like I love Dave Letterman's show on Netflix. It's incredible.
That's a really good point, actually. Yeah, you have
and Seinfeld doing Coffee and Cars. Like he's not even a talk show host, but he kind of became one, but just for the YouTube crowd.
I forget who said there was a really funny. There was a really funny parody of it that was basically like when you become like a gazillionaire, you just get to call up a show and be like,
well,
I like cars and I want to talk to all my friends.
Here's the thing. I wondered if I think Seinfeld kind of figured out like Jay Leno could have been that guy, but it was Seinfeld.
Yeah. No, you're completely right.
I also think the formula, though,
pretty early on.
He cracked the formula before the necessity of the format you're talking about, like the at-home format, where the thing that I really appreciate with Fallon and Kimmel is that they were forced to do the at-home format, but it felt they were also able to like break down the wall of it being like a celebrity guest first, and they were able to treat people as their friends. To varying degrees. I mean, you the whole like veil of Hollywood came crashing down because like when Kimmel has on John Krasinski, right? Like they probably like went to dinner last night with their families, right? So I love seeing that like that camaraderie come through, because I think it adds something to the just the way that they can joke around and play pranks and all that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's so interesting you're saying. So so between the two of us, we kind of have stuff covered, because I am a big Seth Meyers and
no,
John
I am too. I'm
Colbert.
fans of all theirs. I just don't watch them every night,
Yeah, I watch those kind of I watch whatever pops up on YouTube as pretty religiously, like their segments. And one thing it did really make me think about, and this is where, I probably spend way too much time in my head, but it did dawn on me that we're kind of moving a little bit away from the artificial personality. And I think celebrity and all that, they modeled it first, right? And then on social media, influencers, all of that, then they, kind of jumped in there like, oh, it's my glamorous life. And more recently, we've had celebrities and, women, especially with body image, right, come out and be like, this is what I look like without my makeup, right? Or I love the influencers who are like, yeah, you see this photo, like, let me show you what's happening on the other side of the camera, and their house is a disaster. Those moments, and I think are just I think they were so important, because I do think it's interesting, right? Like from a cultural perspective with Instagram influencer, kind of with all these things, there's kind of so much pressure around artificialness, right? This is what I'm controlling the message. I'm putting this out there. And I think you really did see it with these late night hosts. You kind of saw some genuine emotion. I loved seeing like Stephen Colbert down probably not far from where you are. He was like at a beach house with his family and they were like producing the whole thing. And like the dog was running in the set, right? And like they were, it was just like, this is what's happening. Seth Meyers was like bored out of his brain and was like making costumes for his kids because like that was it, right? And I think there was just some approachability, and so we'll see where.
Yeah,
we'll see.
I just think my sincere hope is that whether it's an entertainment show like that or a fan event like Comic-Con or Dragon Con or any of those, or a tech conference. I think the takeaway, our professional opinion, the RAB plus Suzie combined, is that you're going to, if you're smart, you're going to keep that. Because think about it this way. When you and I were doing like influencer marketing 5 years ago together, for a really large company. We were trying to figure out how to go the other direction. We were trying to figure out how do you blend in the digital interaction with a live event in a natural way. And some of it was hit or miss, right? It needed to get beyond live tweeting, right? We were always trying to seek like, what's that deeper interaction, or how does it really benefit, either fans or customers or user groups or anything like that, right?
Yeah. And it was always the type of thing where you have the vibe in the room is so good. And then as soon as you turn on the cameras, you're not capturing that same
there's something
right?
gets missed because like, even if it's like, Brian Fanzo doing his thing and live streaming, like it's cool, but it's not everything for sure.
No, it's not. And it's interesting. I think there's something to be said that digital communications, there are some aspects where I think we can communicate in different ways that we can't communicate. We can communicate with different people. We can, have different audiences, things like that. And there's super effective. But there's also something to be said for the less scripted, more honest. And that maybe that's part of it. Is digital communications, we feel pressured to script it, right? That was always something, especially early on, to try and get a big brand to be okay with off the cuff. And I mean, to be honest, it's not necessarily fair to the guest either, right? You turn on the camera and they're all over the place. So I'm hoping, I know when I teach my class this fall on social media marketing, I'm really excited to talk to kind of what I'm going to be telling my students is like, we still need to wait, right? Like let's still see how people sort this out, because I think as marketers, we really react to like our responsibility, how we get brands to interact is to kind of figure out how humans are figuring out how they interact. And humans have been shifting that along the entire digital, as digital's come up, we're changing how we're comfortable communicating. And I think this has thrown all of us for a loop, and we're going to be more tolerant of certain formats and maybe a little bit more frustrated with others.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So we could devote many more episodes to this topic. Like I was like kicking myself because we're broadcasting, we're live now on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch all at the same time, and StreamYard. Thank you very much for your awesome service here.
Yes.
But we don't usually broadcast this show on LinkedIn Live, but we could. We need, if we're going to do like weeks,
marketing,
maybe we need the show called like Weeks Start to talk about this topic.
That could be interesting.
That could be interesting, right? We could do like coffee on a Monday morning. That could work.
Because I mean, this is really important stuff. Like the world, like the brands. I think it's going to be really interesting to see which brands move first, what they do, what totally fails, what works well, right? We're going to see.
And beyond events, like there's really a lot of, like I want to go back to a conference and work with, or meet clients and do all that. I'm not super excited to go back to the office. And so there's that whole other debate of like, what's your workplace going to look like? And so let's plan that, but let's switch gears and let's go back to our favorite topic of the week here, which is the series Loki on Disney Plus. So let me set up for folks. If you didn't watch last week's WeeksEnd stream, we did get into sort of what it is, what's happened, 3 episodes in, very interesting. So if you need the setup, you haven't watched the series, go watch that. If you've already been watching, spoiler alert, there's going to be a lot of spoilers.
Major spoilers.
We're not going to hold back because episode 4 really kind of like took it to past 11, I think, past 11 to like 19 or maybe 20. I'm not sure.
It broke it. Right. It just kind of whatever the meter was, it's just
whatever the TVA like RetroTech dial is. Yeah, that's what I imagine, an analog dial that just like is like bouncing against the little stem. Yeah. Because I will tell you, I was going to show some tweets of like I put up some tweets last night when I was promoting our show today, but I was like, these are the 4 phases of my reactions to the show, and it's just like, one was like Wanda Maximoff, like screaming, like one was David Schwimmer, like going nuts. And then, like I think one was actually was Tom, who plays Loki, weeping in Asgardian, right? So
Yes.
a lot happened in this episode. Where do we even want to start here? Like, I don't even know.
I know, right? Like, I mean, we can start at the beginning.
Let's start at the beginning. Let's do it. Because there was a very clean sort of, from episode to episode, it's happening in pretty much real time. And our faithful heroes, anti-heroes, we should call them, I guess, they're trapped on a planet and they think they're going to die. So Sylvie, aka Lady Loki, and the King of Mischief, Mr. Loki and Mrs. Loki, which there's a whole thing here. They look like, I thought they were like going to say screw it and start making out. Like, I don't know what kind of vibes you got. Oh
yeah. No, I mean, that was part of the thing, right? Like, it was just like the timeline goes straight up and you're like, okay, like, are they going to start doing the classic thing where it's like, let's just look at each other and, like Rogue One style, right? Like make out at the end of the world. And then the TVA comes in at the last minute. But yeah, that was so fascinating. Like, both of them are just amazing actors, right? I think that's one of the things that you're really I mean, the cast is just fantastic. The directing is amazing. But it's just so fascinating to see this scene where there's special effects like crazy, right? Yeah. And often when you have those crazy special effects scenes, the focus isn't on the acting. It's on like, oh my God, the moon is like falling on you. And yet they have this moment where you're just like, you can see them kind of like, what's going on? Like, what's this attraction? What, like, super uncomfortable. It was just like, that to me is part of the show, right?
I also thought there was a really interesting parallel between like this episode is really bookended by these two major moments of like, there's this moment that, they think, Sylvie thinks all her scheming and we find out she's been fighting against the TVA for a different reason. Like, they are calling her a terrorist. Turns out they show a flashback of Sylvie. They snatched her when she was like 10 years old.
Yeah.
And my theory, this is not even my theory, I probably read it on Twitter, but my theory is that like, they thought that she was diverging in her timeline because she was going to turn out to be a smart, capable woman that does good things in Asgard. And so they basically destroy her life. They yank her, process her. How heartbreaking was that, right?
That was intense, right? That I think I really appreciate that we got to see all of her back and forth with Loki. Kind of, you even get her like talking a little bit, alluding to it. I appreciate that we didn't find out that full heartbreaking story until the beginning of episode 4. It feels like seasons each one, right. But like, because I think that would have colored. You would have been like, oh my God, how damaged. And you also would have been like, oh, she's also the same kind of Loki goddess of mischief. Like, she's going to have this other thing. Whereas if you look at her more as like, if she's that hero person, then who wants to save the day, who kind of has those morals, as opposed to kind of the Loki, which is like the villain reclaimed. I mean, that's very different. Loki's been assuming that she's just like him, like has the same, it's like, what's your angle? What are you trying to do? And she's like, no, like literally, I just want my life back. Like and we need to undo this because this is super evil. But yeah,
I'm also interested in know, like, how did she discover the ultimate? Like, she didn't know everything, but she did know enough that TVA was not real. Yeah. And so I find that interesting. And that's kind of like coming to a head in episode 4, where most of the Disney Plus series, like WandaVision or, Falcon and Winter Soldier, they had kind of like, I would call it a slow start, where they had to like build and build and build for like 5-6 episodes. And then the last 2 episodes are satisfying and kind of like do the big reveals and kind of like, blow your mind with what the direction they went. This feels like they're moving in a way faster, but So I'm curious about where it's going.
This is the only one that has a season 2.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
and I think,
okay.
So I think they're doing more world building.
Right.
I think they're letting themselves open up more plot lines. So you're totally right. Like, you could have an entire thing about like episode about young, or like flashbacks with young Sylvie. Like,
right.
How does she find out this information? Where does this, what's this angle? Kind of, where does that go? I really like that, because I will say that to me has been one of the limitations. I think it worked for WandaVision. I think it hurt Falcon and the Winter Soldier to be contained to just 6 episodes.
Yeah.
And then we also know that they had their whole other issues, but I think it really, it made them keep a lot of characters 2-dimensional that, and just mess with that, right? They had too many characters. I think WandaVision, they had a small enough cast that it worked, and it was like, okay, and and there were more episodes too, even though they were shorter. Falcon Winter Soldier, it feels like a really extended after credits scene at times, right? Just setting up these additional characters.
Yeah. But I still liked it, because being a fan of X-Men, for me, Falcon and Winter Soldier, and I won't spend a lot of time on this, but like bringing in Madripoor, and it started to feel like they were bringing in these side stories from years ago in the comics. Because there's a mutant and Wolverine tie-in with that whole thing. So that was exciting. His
bar, right? They showed Wolverine's hangout, right?
Right.
Oh no, I wanted, but that was the thing, is it felt like they were kind of like, we have to include this, but like, we can't stay. We have to move on to the next thing. Like,
it was like build with like a bunch of like Easter egg moments, and then they get to the end. But you're right. But I think,
let me show you what arrived this week, actually.
Here we go, people. Grand reveal. Oh my God. That is cool. That is like, that's legit, man. Those goggles are like amazing.
Right? They're actually, I also have the Falcon one.
Okay.
They're much better than whatever production they did with Falcon.
That is amazing. I just love it's not, you almost don't perceive his goatee in the show.
Right?
It's just kind of like there, but when you see it on the character, you're like, wow, that's cool.
I saw this. This is the GameStop version, and I forget, he has a certain stance, and I was just like, this is for like so many reasons, this gives me all the feels. And I was like, this is, so yeah, ultimately, FYI, like I love it. It's just more, if we're talking format, I did feel like it was one that got shortchanged, and that it made me sad, because I feel like we missed out.
Well, know. I think, I'm hoping that.
Do we want the cut?
They're going to strengthen. Well, they're going to move. Cut? Well, maybe that, or they're going to. I think they are setting up Phase 4. I mean,
yeah.
Whereas Loki ain't going to Phase 4. So they need a TV series if they're going to keep it. And here's the problem, is that people love this character so much that killing him off in Endgame, I mean, it's kind of smart how they're doing it now, because it's like an alternative, it's an alternate branch of a timeline, so that there's this whole structure of like why it makes sense and is it silly. I feel like that's the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. people must be like, this is what we were trying to do. Right. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is like, where the hell's our budget?
I know, like, what? That we built this for you. Like, we tried this first with Bill Coulson. So it'll be interesting, because Loki dying right after Ragnarok is canon, and him coming back as Lady Loki after Ragnarok is also canon. So there's some ways, and young Loki, or is it late? Who's part of the Young Avengers? Is it young Loki, or is it Lady Loki who?
I don't know, because I've said this on our show before, but like I love Marvel, but I stayed squarely in the mutant kind of bubble of things. So I know about some crossover stuff, but I've never read Captain America, never read Avengers. I honestly, that to me, I've enjoyed the films probably more because I haven't read it, but I do appreciate like the deep cut stuff of like, I know that's real, like that kind of stuff. But with Loki, I'm interested because, so this is with the series on Disney Plus starting at that moment in Endgame where they were trying to go back in time, grab the stones, all that stuff. Like he snuck off, and that was the kickoff of the alternate timeline for this series, which I thought was smart.
Yeah.
And so it does bring into question, though. I mean, as well, let's just rip the Band-Aid off. Like everybody's shipping, Sylvie and Loki, but things don't turn out good in this episode. I mean, so first of all, a lot of people die in this episode. I mean, if you want to call pruning dying, I guess.
We don't. That's the question, right?
I guess that's the question. Does the boomstick really is that you could be transferred into a TVA database? Maybe, I don't know.
Where you watched the last scene, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No. The credit scene. No. So I'm kicking myself because I didn't see it. So I was watching this at 2 a.m. last night, and I was watching it with my son who had not seen the previous 3. So I was like, I gotta watch it. I'm talking to Suzie tomorrow. And so I watched it, and then I did most of the time there's not an increase in
never.
Credit scene.
This was the.
But then I saw people tweeting this other stuff, and I'm like, oh crap, what did I miss? So what did I miss in the post?
Well, so you missed, and I know it's so they had one, I think, in WandaVision, and ever since then, because I missed that one. So ever since then, I fast forward to make sure I'm okay. And this one, you're like, oh God, I have to wait another week to find out what's going on. Yeah. And then Loki's eyes open. He's laying in the grass, and he's like, "Am I in hell? Am I in hell?" And subtitles say H-E-L, which is the Norse hell.
Right.
What to say. Yeah. And there's a voice that says, no, but if you want to live, you've got to come with us, which is totally Terminator.
Oh, okay. Now I get it. Because
and then he looks up, and there are at least 3 Lokis. I hope that Gator Loki is a 4th Loki. And
so there were a lot of Gator Loki memes floating around.
Yes, many Gator. Night. So the one who was talking, and I'm so bad with actors' names, but I think it's Richard something. And we knew that he was being cast for it, and a lot of people thought that he was going to end up being the ultimate big bad, or being like He Who Remains, or whoever created the Timekeepers. He is original vintage Loki. Okay. And so he's there.
But this isn't the scene that was leaked early on that had 3 Lokis with election pins on or something.
No. Okay. It's not. No, this isn't. This is a separate one. This is them. It looks like they're in Central Park with Avengers Tower messed up in the distance.
So this has got to be a tie-in to this. I'm getting more excited because if I have to guess, I feel like this might be a tie-in to going into Doctor Strange movie, right? Maybe, I don't know.
Potentially, there's a few different theories that I've heard about this. So one is this could be some sort of prison dimension where they just send all the Lokis. So it's the idea of hell is other people. it's all you. So it's full of Lokis. And the Lokis have destroyed everything, which I kind of like. There's another, which I think is really interesting, is that this is an alternative universe where Ultron was successful. And so that's why all the towers are messed up. And I think that's really interesting.
It might just be crazy Lokis because
that's my favorite one. I think
Mobius talks about how they have one of the interesting quotes from this episode is "You're no big deal." He says specifically they've hunted down hundreds of Lokis, and they've also hunted down. I thought the other references were interesting because I saw a deep cut on Twitter last night. He mentions vampires and a couple other things, and this guy on Twitter last night was showing a picture of Blade and be like, "What's up? Where's the OG Marvel superhero?" Right?
Yeah.
A lot of people think that Blade, by the way, should be MCU original, OG black superhero, and I agree. But most people that watched the Blade films back in the day, because I think that was a Fox film. That's kind of relegated off to X-Men, No Man Land. Yeah. But here's what I want to ask. In addition, is that before Loki meets his whatever weird pruning end, Mobius gets it too.
I know. So where is he?
Where's he?
That's
so
the question.
So he's on a jet ski, or so
Right.
another funny
Like
meme.
Owen Wilson.
So the funny memes were like him wearing his TVA shirt and tie, riding a jet ski. That one's kind of funny but obvious. There's another one where it's like all of his characters from other films saying "Come with us."
Yes.
And it's the guy from like Night at the Museum and the guy from like Zoolander.
That's what I want. Like that's what I desperately want to happen in Loki is I want us
break
to
that wall, like literally.
Yes. I
would be funny.
I want it to be like the Owen Wilsons are, are there. Cause like these are variants. Like you could totally do that. And I feel like it's a bonkers enough show that,
so
it would just be really funny.
I think you're onto something. I do think that this has got to be like to make a DC analogy, like this is the Phantom Zone maybe for variants that they can't control. Like if it like we know now that the entire TVA is variants that they have brainwashed essentially. Yep. So I guess the question now is like if you're like Mobius and you're their top agent and somehow you wake up and take the red pill,
where do you go?
What do they do with you? I guess this is like a extended version of the comical time loop that we had, the time loop jail cell, I guess, that Loki was in the middle of this episode, right?
Oh my God. Yeah.
Which was hilarious, by the way.
Which was great. And we got to see Lady Sif, which is
right. I mean, and she
first time back on screen.
The gag is no matter what he said, she kicked him in the balls and said, "You're a loser," basically like 150 times.
You'll always be alone. You'll always be alone. You'll always be alone, which I did think was so interesting, right? Like you kind of get a sense of one of the themes. It makes you think like one thing that I was thinking about is like one of the real transformational moments at the end of Ragnarok, of course, as we know, is like when Loki's actually there, right? And he catches Thor's like, "You're not even here," and then Loki's like, "I'm here," right. And you kind of get a sense of their bond. And one of the fascinating things for about the show for me has been they're kind of like speeding up that bond. It's like, how can we get there without Ragnarok so that we have the same type of character?
He's getting there quicker, but go ahead. Sorry. But you still,
I was going to say, I think it felt like in this episode, he really got there. It was the he like saw the importance of relationship, right? So like he lies, he like tries to, he basically is like, "Oh yeah, I'm the mastermind," right?
To try and protect her. The way I'm tying all that together, and I think you're right. I think the reason it's realistic is that I think he finally has realized that his life of mischief and his sort of like credo of always being alone and not falling in love or whatever, no one is his equal. When he reads about him essentially being directly responsible for killing his mother, and then Asgard itself is completely destroyed, and then and I guess he's assuming his brother both are killed. Like, I mean, I think if that's not a come to Jesus moment, I don't know what is, right? To mix your mythologies. But so Loki is like, if Mobius can be my friend, it's more than just the situational kind of like transactional relationships that he's probably had. And then when he realizes Sylvie at the same time is like, he's had the whole season has been that he thinks he's the best Loki out there. And I think he finally realizes that she is his better, and and not only that, she deserves it. So he's like, for the first time in his life, he could have a real relationship, and it's about to be yanked out from under him. Yeah.
Yeah. And you just it's just so interesting, right? You just, I completely agree with how you sum that up. And I think we're starting to see what this show is about, because it sounds a little bit like WandaVision, which is
that's a good point.
Which is interesting because with WandaVision, I feel like it was so disorienting because it was in such a weird world. So you're like, what is this show's about? And that was like much more top of mind. I feel like I probably could have told you a few different things that I thought Loki was about, but it would kind of have been like, oh, it's like kind of a funny thing where it's like, it's kind of like Office humor. They even have like in end credits, they have like the water cooler. which is like awesome. So there's like bureaucracy, there's, you know, all stuff, which, you know, I'm sure you find as hilarious as I do
think
in some ways.
I love I love the retro tech, but I was like, I was looking really hard at the typewriter in the end credits, trying to figure out if it's like if it's because Graham and I are always seeking out like when there's IBM tech in the background.
Yes.
If that, but it has TVA, like it's the production value of all that is great, by the way. Like if that, you know, we were thinking that's an IBM Selectric, but it's like, it's a TVA Selectric.
It's the, you know, yeah, I think that's the interesting thing is we're kind of getting these like friendship vibes. We're getting these kind of like romantic, but in kind of a different way. You know, it's not just like, oh, here's a guy, here's a girl, you know.
But it is like I'm not going to use the right words. It's like, there was all this talk a couple of weeks ago that, you know, it's canon now that Loki is, you know, bisexual. And I think when you look at like, it doesn't have any meaning for a god. I mean, that's just like, if you look at if you read Norse mythology or even reading about Thor and everything, like I've read Neil Gaiman's book about Norse mythology. I highly recommend.
It is on my to-read list. I've heard
you have to. It's fabulous. But the point is, like, it is blurring that line, and so it's interesting to like use this really like you know, old school way of making it topical for today. That it's like those things don't have meaning. It's just about the relationship. Yeah,
and I will say, I am fully expecting Marvel to do a much better job in terms of representation, because it is like it is I think it's a really fair point where it's like it's like, have you met the Greek gods? Have you met, like they kind of go every which way. Like that's just how they roll. I think we really want to see a character who is, you know, kind of I want to see what the Arrowverse has served up, right? I want to see Marvel do that.
Good point.
In their universe, right? Like that there's been they've just done so many amazing things there. Like, let's get there, right? Like what's the deal? So that was my only kind of thing where I was like, really, Marvel, like you're getting a lot of traction here, and he's with the like anyway, that was my little like
Well, here's a good segue to wrap us up in the next couple of minutes here. Speaking of self-awareness and all that, there was an announcement, not this week, but there's been a lot of new Aliens universe stuff. There's a new game coming out, which looks amazing, which is like a squad-based, you know, shooter game. It looks incredible. But then there's been an announcement of a series that's presumably going to be on one of the streaming services. I can't remember which one, if it's Netflix or another. But there was some fervor this week on social media about the description of the series, and they've announced a lot of the actors, and it looks kind of like a CW show. And you're like, wait a minute, this is Aliens. But there's been the negative reaction from more of the conservative side of the Twitterverse about like, oh, they're going to ruin another series, you know, that about wokeism, and, you know, just keep to shooting xenomorphs, because those are the people I think that just love the James Cameron film. I can't hear that, because when you go like Alien is one of my favorite films. It's a Ridley Scott film. It's a masterpiece. It's brilliant, but it is about it's a psychological film. That's why it's scary, and it's got this other layer of like the working man being held down, and then like, if you want to be glib about it, it's a hostile work environment essentially, right? So to say that Alien isn't woke from the beginning is kind of weird. Like, so maybe you should go watch the first film and kind of think about that. Think about the themes of that film. Think about the themes of Blade Runner. I don't know what your take on this is, but it just seems like we're having these weird, like really misinformed conversations about science fiction these days.
Yeah, I think the challenge, right, is there was a lot of tokenism from a representation perspective, right, in a lot of these shows. I think there's like two different things, right? One is sci-fi, like real sci-fi is anti-establishment. It tends to be very, it tends to be challenging the authority. It tends to be challenging the way, things are run. And if you look at when tons of the stories are written, I mean, they're talking about the classic 1950s, that establishment is what they're pushing back against. So, but then when those get interpreted and the movies get created, the shows get created, because there is this, and we know from a marketing perspective, right? We've been there, where in the room, it's like, well, who's going to sell more stuff? And let's be honest, like it's only very, very recently, and even still, you have a hard time. It's like kind of like, okay, that's enough women. Okay, that's enough Black people. Like, okay, you've done your thing, right? It's hard to be able to actually say, no, let's make this about that journey.
Yeah.
And I do think that what this tokenism has done is, so you look at something where like there are like feminist pieces out there about Alien, right? About how this has these feminist themes, but it was made acceptable because it's tokenism. And so like, people who don't get it, like.
The problem I have though, I've studied this film so much, and the series in general, I'm a fan of. Every film in the series is very different. I like all of them, but they did become like, some of them were made for not the wrong reason, but just different reasons to satisfy the fan base or have more action or a new take. And that's all fine and good. I would say the original vision of the original film was that, yes, it established a female action star at a time that nobody had seen that, and then that blew up even more in the sequel that James Cameron did. But the original film, they were trying to say that like, kind of like sex doesn't matter, I think, meaning that gender doesn't matter, or the like we had already achieved equality because you had, Ripley in the role that she was in, and she was just out there in charge of, she was a lieutenant, I think. Like some of the interesting, like behind the scenes stuff is like, the hyper sleep chamber in the ship, Nostromo. The original filming of that scene is that they were all going to be nude. So it was like, and they actually filmed it. Like there's people have unearthed photography, and like, they're all like they were covering certain parts, but it was essentially they were all like sex doesn't matter. And it's the same idea of like in the James Cameron film, when like all of the colonial soldiers, the Marines, they all live together, they shower together, they eat together. I mean, we've seen that in other sci-fi, but the point is like they were trying to like mess with people's expectations at and this is in the 70s, this is in the 80s when they're doing it, and then again in the 90s. But the point is like, I just find it like almost like we've regressed in some of the current conversations when we should be just going past this into some other deeper conversation, rather than it just being a short-sighted sort of tribalism type of debate when it comes to that.
I totally agree. I think the challenge is, I don't think we ever had that conversation. I think it was something where if you got it, you got it. And you're like, it's there. But it was more like woven in. Because, for example, in another sci-fi, I have, I'm a big Trek fan. And you could say, for original series, oh my God. But Next Generation really does work on trying to be very equal, right? And they kind of have that. And yet,
well, and Discovery. How about Discovery now? I would argue, like, wow, they're pushing some buttons.
Discovery's does much more, but it gets tons of backlash for being too woke from the original fans, right? And they'd point to TNG and be like, this is the ultimate. But TNG, women are wearing certain outfits, right? They're not, you kind of get these challenges, right? Where you're like, that's the message is equality, but it's still unfortunately being made within a structure that isn't equal. And I think that's to show off. Right. Exactly. So I think that there's a bit of social commentary, and I think you're completely right. It's now we're having the woke, anti-woke, all stuff like that. And I think it's really important to remember, to your point, the source material, where it's like, no, this was really like, you just didn't get it, right? You didn't understand that this was the message.
Well, let's have. I think there's more we can do. We could talk more about that on a future episode. I think it would be interesting to see, is there a breakthrough there? I think there could be.
Oh yeah.
I want to bring back in the last minute here. I want to bring it back to toys. So tell me, you mentioned in the green room that you had put in a new order for some new Funko Pops. So tell us about the latest.
Yes, guys, I am so excited. So, and I've decided that this has to do with like my love for the shows, right? Do I want to be surrounded by them? So I have a few, like Falcon Winter Soldier. I have like, I kind of, I was like, okay, gotta get Captain America. Kind of gotta do that. WandaVision, I ended up getting all of them. They are, I think I can show you.
You don't need to get them all, but I want to hear about the Loki series because they're doing so many variants, guys. Right? Oh, yeah.
Yes. So those are my WandaVision guys. So the Loki ones, currently what they have, I'm really excited for their next release because I think we will have all the variants. But right now they have, you can get Sylvie, Loki, Hunter B15, which was really interesting because by releasing a pop toy, you kind of get a sense that she's going to be more integral to the story. And I think you get that payoff in episode 4. Yeah. Mobius, of course. And then you get Renslayer, and Renslayer comes with a little Miss Minutes, which I also think is very
that's probably the motivator to get that one, though, I would think. Right? She's probably not the most popular out of that series.
No. So we'll see. But you're totally right. Funko is absolutely going to do another drop. And I do think we're going to... I'm hoping we'll get, Loki for president. I'm hoping, we're going to get like Kid Loki and Gator Loki.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But yeah.
I'm sure.
So and keep your eyes peeled on those.
Those are awesome. Thank you for sharing. Once they come in, we'll show them off on the show.
Oh, yeah.
It triggered another thought, though. It seems like we've come a long way from when there was a big debate over like Black Widow toys being non-existent when the Avengers came out. And then and there was like boycotts over it. So it's interesting to see. I do think we've made some really positive changes there. And,
yeah. If you haven't had a chance to see Scarlett Johansson's comments about the second Iron Man movie, so when she was introduced, and just about how like she can't even. Yeah. I mean, that was so. Because it was really kind of, it messed with my mind when I went back and watched that and was like, wait, I was okay with this. I felt so gross watching that specific scene that she was talking about. And so, yeah, we've progressed. And you know what? I will take that any day of the week.
It's something. So let's end it here. There's a lot with Loki, folks. Go watch it. Let us know what you think. Let us know your theories. Let us know what you think, where we're headed next. Suzie, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for subbing in to be my variant co-host today.
I tried to live up to the standard.
I would argue that you're rocking your timeline pretty well. So thank you.
I'm trying. I'm trying.
Right. Thanks, Suzie. Thanks everybody for watching. This is WeeksEnd. We'll see you next week. Tune in. Talk to you soon.
Bye.